Shabbat ends so late in the summer, and we have reached like the latest Shabbat endings. If you're with us tonight, God bless you. If you're on the East Coast, you're up really late. Burning the midnight oil, and it is a big zechut, a big merit to be learning Torah at night. So well done. Yasher koach if you're with us on the East Coast and learning late into the night. Let me get the videos in front of me, and then let's see who's with us, who's in the house. Oy vey. Okay. I'm going to have to get that fixed. All right. Here we go. Janice Beanstalk, Miriam Yerushalmi, Sharon Ashford, Sandy McMurray, welcome to the program. Annie Jacobs says Shavua Tov. Timothy Wheeler waves. Janice Beanstalk says Shavua Tov. Sandy McMurray says good evening. Sue Strauss says she's in Chicago. Miriam says, thank you for all you do, and thank you for your beautiful writing, Miriam. Miriam is one of our contributors in the Table for Five. Sharon Fran Brooks says, hanging outside on the deck in Lebanon, New Jersey. Beautiful. Learning Torah near 1 a.m. in Lebanon, New Jersey. Love it. Timothy says, take care, sir. Donella Rowland says, hello from Las Vegas. Rachel Faith Angeles takes a bow. And Timothy is in from Phoenix. Beautiful to be learning with you all on a Saturday night. I hope that you are safe wherever you are. We emerged from Shabbos today and looked at the news, and it seems that there were some very large demonstrations. People expressed themselves peacefully today. Thank God. I know there was a big demonstration not far from our house. We heard helicopters all day, but we didn't hear sirens. So it really looks like the people who are doing the protesting are having their voices heard without having their protests hijacked by looters. Thank God. That's beautiful. Okay, let us get into our learning tonight, and let's dedicate our learning this evening to everybody who's healing. I mean, you know, there's been so much news in the last week, and rightfully so, about the protests. But we're still in the middle of the pandemic. It's not like the pandemic went away. So if you are ill or you know somebody who is ill, may you and they have a complete and speedy recovery of body, spirit, mind. Everyone who is ailing, may they have the recovery that they need. And may we all be spared. May everyone be spared. May you be spared of catching this disease which has so transformed the planet. May this plague pass quickly, and we say amen. Okay, we are in Shabbos. We're in Masechet Shabbos, the second volume of the Talmud. We're on Daf 92, Daf Tzadi Beis, and today we're going to complete our discussion of Mishnah number 2. And in this chapter 10, it seems like we have some short Mishnahs and short discussions, short Gemaras of the Mishnahs. And so we're actually going to cover Mishnahs 3 and 4. So we'll finish Mishnah 2 and cover Mishnahs 3 and 4 of chapter 10 tonight. Mishnah 2, recall, we've been talking about somebody who takes a basket of fruit or other foodstuffs from the private domain out into the public domain, but he doesn't quite get there. And so he deposits the basket in a carmelit, a domain which is neither the private domain nor the public domain. Imagine a very wide threshold of the doorway. So he's exempt from violating Shabbos because he didn't complete that transfer from the private domain to the public domain. And likewise, if he takes his basket and he puts it on a line so that the basket is straddling the private domain and the public domain, he is also exempt because the basket has not completed the transfer from one domain to another. And this, even though the basket might be a large basket and there are things in the basket which are over the line and they're in the public domain, but we have this concept of fusion so that everything that is in the basket is considered one thing, and until the basket goes completely from the private domain to the public domain, the person is exempt from liability for violating Shabbos. So in order, as we seek to understand this transfer of the basket and being one thing, our sages introduce another idea. And who is it? And it's Rav Bevai bar Abaye. Rav Bevai, the son of Abaye, introduces the idea of one who steals a purse on Shabbos. So with a purse, you were thinking ancient world, right? So a purse it's like a little money bag, a coin purse, right? A coin bag. And one who steals the purse, somebody else's purse on Shabbos, and this is a Jew who steals a purse on Shabbos, so he is obliged to observe Shabbos. A non-Jew would not be. Everyone obviously has to obey the law not to steal. But the question here is, this person who steals a purse on Shabbos, is he going to be liable for theft? And in this case, what the sages are asking is he going to be liable for making restitution? It seems obvious, like, why wouldn't he be? The fact that he steals it on Shabbos is somehow going to let him off the hook. To understand the case, we have to understand a few things. So first of all, the biblical penalty for stealing is not jail, right? There's no concept of jail in the Bible. A heavy punishment is the death penalty. A medium punishment is getting whipped, lashes. And then there's lighter punishments. And then for unwitting violations, you bring sin offerings and guilt offerings, etc. But for theft, in addition to whatever the penalty may be, you also have to make restitution of the thing that you stole plus a fifth, right? Plus 20%, I guess, for inconveniencing the person that you stole from. But there's also a principle that if you do one act, and at the moment that you commit that act, you become liable to two different penalties. So you're only going to have one penalty imposed on you, and it's going to be the heavier penalty. Now, we know that a person who violates Shabbat unwittingly brings a sin offering. That's what we've been talking about. But a person who violates Shabbat intentionally, that's actually a death penalty offense. Was this ever imposed? I mean, once in the 40 years that the children of Israel were wandering in the desert, and later than that. This is really, I don't know. But right now we're trying to understand the principle, right? So in theory, you become liable for violating Shabbos and liable to a death penalty if somebody said to you, if you do that, you're going to violate Shabbos, and then you do it immediately after being warned, and there's two witnesses to both the warning and the violation. At that point, the person would be liable to the death penalty. Would it be imposed on him? Whole other question. What's relevant here is that if he then becomes liable to the death penalty, that's obviously a much heavier, stiffer penalty than making the restitution. And so he wouldn't have to make the restitution if he became liable for both penalties at the same time. How did he violate Shabbos? Because when he lifted the purse that he's stealing, now he's stolen it. By lifting it, he's acquired it. That's called the kinyan. When you lift it, now you've acquired it for yourself. You've completed the act of stealing because you have the intent to steal and you lifted it. And then you take it out to another domain. So then you did this. You carried from one domain to another on Shabbos, or if it was in the public domain and you carried it 4 cubits, you are guilty of carrying on Shabbos. So then you would be liable to the death penalty and the restitution plus the 20%. So if you're liable to two things that happen at the same time, we only impose the stiffer penalty, in this case the death penalty, and the restitution wouldn't happen. However, there's a couple of caveats about this. First of all, he didn't become liable for both at the same time. When he lifted the purse, he became liable for theft, and now he has to make the restitution when he's, caught or made to restore, or he feels guilty and wants to do the right thing. He doesn't become liable for violating Shabbos until he lifts it, carries it into another domain, and now he's got it on his person or it goes on the ground. then he carried, or he carries it 4 cubits in the public domain, then he carried. So the penalty for theft actually took hold before the penalty for violating Shabbos. He stole before he violated Shabbos, and therefore the two violations did not happen at the same moment. The two penalties did not take hold at exactly the same moment, and he has to do both. He has to restore the purse plus 20% because he stole it, and he's going to be liable for violating Shabbos. So then the sages say, well, what if he dragged the money bag? What if he dragged the purse so he never lifted it? So then it becomes a different situation, and he's going to become liable. He never lifted it, so he's going to acquire it when he transfers it from one domain to the other, and that's the same moment when he violates Shabbos. So the two penalties take hold at the same moment. The heavier penalty is going to be for violating Shabbos. He's not going to have to make the restitution plus 20%. But lest our heads explode and think, he's going to get away with theft because he violated Shabbos too? No, he still has to return the purse. He's just not going to have to make the official restitution with that additional 20%. I'm going to keep going because it's so late. But at the end of their session, like I always do, I'll take questions and comments in the comments. So you go ahead and ask, and I'll just get to it in a little bit. Okay, that's in terms of stealing a purse on Shabbos. One is liable for stealing the purse. Mishnah number 3. One who carries an object from one domain to another in the normal manner, meaning he's holding it in his hand, or he's carrying it on his shoulder, or it's got it tied with a rope around his chest. They didn't have backpacks in the ancient world, but I'm going to assume that if he had did it with a backpack now, he would be liable for carrying because he's carrying in the normal manner. This Mishnah comes to teach that if you carry in an atypical manner, then you would be exempt from violating Shabbos. So if he carried it on the back of his hand, or he carried it with his foot, or he tied it with a rope to his back, not like a backpack, but just an odd way of tying it, where it would not really be secure and you couldn't tell if this thing was still tied to you. Or some other examples. Back of the hand, foot. He carries with his mouth, or he carries with his elbow. Atypical methods of carrying. So then he's going to be exempt from violating Shabbos for carrying from one domain to another. And if we think about, what is the rationale for this? Basically, our sages are defining carrying. So it's not any carrying. If you're doing some kind of weird version of carrying, so then you're not doing what the Torah came to prohibit. This does become some kind of a loophole. And basically, I think where this is really relevant is if, you never want to violate Shabbos, period. You shouldn't violate Shabbos. But if you're in a situation where for some reason it's kind of an emergency and you feel like you have to, so then at least carry it in an atypical way so that the people around you would see, okay, he realizes that he's violating Shabbos. He's doing it in an atypical way. He must have a strong reason. It's not that he's an ignoramus who's violating Shabbos, or worse, an apicorus who doesn't care that he's violating Shabbos. Right? So if you carry in an atypical manner, it's not considered carrying. In the Gemara of this Mishnah, they discuss if you carry something very high, like if you carry it way up above your head, is that typical carrying or atypical carrying? And so we look actually at the example, which we just had in the Parsha this week. So it's a nice coincidence that the sons of Kehat, who is one of the sort of sub-tribes of Levi, of the children of Israel, the tribe of Levi. I happen to be a Levite. I don't know if I'm one of the sons of Gershon or Merari or Kehat, but the sons of Kehat, the family of Kehat, were charged with carrying the holiest things as the children of Israel journeyed from one place to another in the wilderness. And one of the things they carried was the Ark of the Covenant, right? So if you ever saw the movie Raiders of the Lost Ark with Harrison Ford, we're talking about the Ark of the Covenant. which inside it was the scroll of the Torah written by Moses and the tablets of the Ten Commandments, both the broken first tablets and the whole second tablets that he brought down. So this is, the holiest object in the world, basically. And it was this tribe that would carry it, and they would carry it. There were 2 poles that went on either side of the ark through rings for that purpose, and then they would carry it on their shoulders. And the sons of Kehat were not given wagons, right? So when they inaugurated the tabernacle, that was just it. We just read that today in the Torah. When they inaugurated the tabernacle, the princes of the 12 tribes brought all these gifts, including silver and gold, for the vessels of the tabernacle, everything that the Kohanim, the priests, would use in the tabernacle, and they brought wagons. And these wagons, each tribe donated one beautiful, totally decked out, really well-made wagon. I think that would be drawn by oxen. And then the wagons, Moses and Aaron distributed them among the Leviim, the Levites, who would be charged with transporting everything that was necessary for the tabernacle. The sons of Kehat, the sub-tribe of Kehat, didn't receive any wagons because they were carrying the holiest of things, and they had to carry it themselves. They couldn't load it up on a wagon. So isn't that interesting that the holiest object in the world, the Ark of the Covenant, when it would go from one place to another, it was carried by people on feet, not in the back of a wagon pulled along by oxen. So while it was being carried on their shoulders, it was also pretty high above the ground. And so from that we learned that carrying something high above the ground is considered a normal type, a typical type of carrying. The covenant, right, is a big box, and on top of it were the 2 cheruvim, the angels that were on top of the Ark of the Covenant, 2 angels. We'll learn this elsewhere in the Talmud, that would sometimes face each other and sometimes face out toward the people. But at any rate, carrying something high is considered a typical form of carrying. We learn that from the work of the tabernacle, the work of transporting all the objects and elements of the tabernacle. And while we're discussing the work of the tabernacle and how tall, because we want to know, well, how tall were the Levites who were carrying the Ark of the Covenant, so we can make some definitions about how high above the ground you can carry something. As part of that discussion, Rav wonders how tall was Moses, because in the Torah it says that Moses spread the covering over the tabernacle, and from that we could say that Moses must have been 10 cubits tall. 10 cubits tall, like a cubit is about 1.5 feet, right? The distance about from the elbow to the middle finger. So that would mean that Moses was 15 feet tall. There's not a lot of support for this opinion in the Talmud. It's just some conjecture by Rav, and then other opinions are brought forward. But so we don't think that Moses was 15 feet tall. I mean, most don't. Rav says it's possible. And then if Moses was 15 feet tall, then maybe and he was a Levite, then maybe all the Levites were 15 feet tall. Maybe they became tall once they left Egypt. Maybe they already were so tall. But other opinions say you don't really have to say they're 15 feet tall in order to understand the Torah properly. However, having introduced this idea of how tall was Moses, Rav tells us, where is it? Rav tells us that the divine presence, the Shekhinah, rests on a here we go. So I think Rav is talking. And the master said, and let us derive from Moses. I'm not sure if Rav said this, but the Gemara says that the divine presence rests upon a person who is wise, mighty, wealthy, and tall. And the note here from Rav Steinsaltz is, all of these attributes enumerated by the prophet are derived from Moses in Masechet Nedarim. So when we get to Tractate Nedarim, we'll study this in greater detail at page 38a. But it's derived from the verse, a prophet will the Lord of your God raise up unto you from the midst of you, of your brethren, like me. Moses says in Deuteronomy chapter 18, and since prophecy is the highest level of perfection, it can only be attained by a person who is complete in spirit and body. So the concept is that when a prophet comes, it's sort of, prophecy happens to somebody who is, I don't know, like a prime specimen of the human being, right? A prime specimen of the human being. And so a prophet, for a person to be a prophet, it seems very likely that that person will be wise, makes sense, mighty, so strong, wealthy, unusual, we wouldn't expect that, and tall. Tall, it's just what it says, and we're learning here that Moses was tall. Wealthy seems unusual. We think that, why would a prophet have, what would the bank account of a prophet matter? It's not discussed in the daf here. Perhaps we'll discuss it more when we get to Tractate Nedarim. But perhaps what it really means is that it's somebody, who's not, who has time, who's not so, busy making a living that he has no time to study, right? So it's going to be doesn't mean that he's fabulously rich, but it's somebody who doesn't have money problems, perhaps, so that he's free to totally focus on the spiritual and the divine, and that the divine presence eventually comes to such a person. At any rate, here it's mentioned in passing that that the divine presence rests on someone who is wise, mighty, wealthy, and tall. Okay, and that's our discussion of Mishnah number 3. And then they also just mentioned that in terms of to be liable for carrying out on Shabbos, you have to carry in something that we would normally define as carrying, and if it's a very atypical manner of carrying, it's not carrying. What about people who carry on their heads? So the sages say that there was an area called Hotzal, and in Hotzal, some people would carry on their heads. So if those people carried something outside, carrying it on their head, are they liable for carrying? And so it's a tough question because in their area, it seems to be normal. Everywhere else, in the world that the sages knew, nobody carries on their head. So the sages said, that is not typical carrying. So even the people of Hotzal, if they carried something on their head, it would still be considered atypical. However, they had the caveat that if it's a thing that is typically carried that way, so if there's something that is, even though most people don't carry on their heads, if there's a thing that when it's carried, people do carry it on their heads, so that would be the normal way of carrying it, and somebody would certainly be liable for carrying that way on Shabbos. And I think if the sages, had lived in a time where there was TV and National Geographic, and they saw that in Africa a lot of people carry stuff on their heads, then they might have said, well, you know what? Now that we see that there are a lot of people carrying on their heads, this is a normal enough manner that if anybody carries on their head, they're going to be liable too. But that's me conjecturing. We don't know. Okay, Mishnah number 4. And this is how we're going to wrap up our discussion for tonight. It's a short Mishnah. And so this says that one who intended to carry an object in front of him and ends up carrying it behind him is exempt from liability for carrying on Shabbos. But somebody who carries behind and ends up carrying in front is liable for carrying on Shabbos. So what's going on here? Basically, if they're intending to carry it in front, right? They're going to carry it. That's going to be a normal way, and they're carrying it in front of them so they can keep an eye on it, right? They have a level of security for this object that they're not going to drop it. They end up carrying it behind them. I'm not sure exactly what the case is, how this works. Let's just assume for a moment that it's literally in their hands. But they end up carrying it behind. So the manner that they intended to carry and the level of protection and security that they wanted to provide to the object that they're carrying, they ended up, giving it less protection and less security, and they carried it in this odd and insecure manner behind their back. And so the intent was not realized, and that's why the person is exempt from liability for Shabbos. But if he intended to carry it out behind his back, and he ends up carrying it behind his back, so then he's liable, because I guess that's going to be, it's in his hand. The fact that it's behind his back is not going to be enough to render it atypical, and he did what he intended to do. And if he intended to carry it behind his back and ends up carrying it in front of him, so he intended to give it a low level of protection or security. In the end, he gave it more protection and security. So even though he didn't complete the action the way that he intended, the way that he completed it only added to the sort of protection and security that he gave to the object that he's carrying, that he, let's say he doesn't want to drop it because it's fragile. So the sages say he is liable for violating Shabbos in that case. Some would say that carrying behind your back is an atypical manner, but that seems to be a minority opinion. The fact is he's carrying it in his hands, so it's typical enough, even though it's behind the back. Okay, that's what I've got for us this evening. Bless you for learning so late at night. These Shabbats that end so late in the summer, so when I go live after Shabbat ends, it ends up being late. But it's a real zechus, a real merit to be learning late into the night. So shkoyach, well done, my friends. Let's look. Una Burke says, carrying from front to carry back reminds me of the Korean mothers. Carrying in front could be pregnancy. Carrying in back is the little bundle that Korean mothers make for their newborn babies as they carry on their work. Interesting. Carrying a baby on Shabbos, carrying it on your shoulder, carrying it on your hip. I don't know if that constitutes carrying or not. I suspect that it does. Luckily I live in LA where we have an Erev, so people don't worry about it. But in places where they don't have an Erev, or some people don't hold by an Erev, so they just, they won't carry in the public domain, even if that community has an Erev around it. And in those communities, or those people who are so stringent that they won't use an Erev, so then they wouldn't be permitted actually to take a stroller out on Shabbos. And this is really tough on the parents, because one of the parents has to keep those kids at home until the kid can carry themselves. Right, and now I'm remembering that there is a principle that when a kid, like a baby you're carrying, when a kid is big enough that they kind of wrap their legs around you and sort of an arm around you, and they start to support a little bit of their own weight, then it's not considered carrying. But maybe that happens, I don't know, when they're 2 years old, 3 years old. I don't remember at what point a child is understood to be contributing to the work of being carried. Let me see if there's any other questions here. I love that Pauline is in from Arkansas. And Paul is in from Louisiana. Una says the sons of Cat Hat. That's I see the closed caption translation, the auto translation instead of Kahat said Cat Hat. That's funny. Okay. Not seeing other questions. Patrick Deneuve says Shalom from Brugge, from Belgium. If you're still with us, Patrick, great to have you with us on the show. And Iris says a good vach. A good vach is how we say in Yiddish. Have a good week, my holy brothers and sisters. Shavua Tov and a good vach. It's great to be learning with you on a Saturday night. And a new name over here on the YouTube side, Rosebud Robin. Welcome to you. Welcome to Accidental Talmudist Daily. Okay, my friends, great learning with you this evening. Tomorrow, with God's help, we'll get over to page 93 of Masechet Shabbos. And these Mishnahs are coming short and quick. There's actually going to be 2 more Mishnahs that we'll cover tomorrow night with God's help. May everybody stay safe. May the learning that we did tonight, which was dedicated to the healing of everyone who is ill with the COVID, may they all heal speedily and quickly, and may our learning be an assistance to them in that. Have a great night.